The room was larger than he expected. Glass walls reached up and curved like the inside of a ship. Hundreds of eyes followed his every step as he walked slowly toward the center podium. Sundar Pichai had faced many rooms before, but this one was different. This one had weight. This one had memory. He took a slow breath, but it didn't settle the storm inside him. This wasn't Silicon Valley. This wasn't a Google event. This wasn't even America. This was India, his home. And it wasn't just any stage, it was the National Leadership Summit, and the man sitting on the front row was the Prime Minister himself. Narendra. Modi sat still, watching. He didn't blink much. His eyes weren't cold, just quiet, searching. Sundar had grown up watching that face on black and white TVs in dusty living rooms in Chennai. Now that face was just 10 feet away, waiting for Sundar to speak. But Sundar couldn't. Not yet. His hands lightly touched the edge of the podium. They looked calm, but he knew they weren't. The nerves didn't come from fear of failing. They came from something older, deeper. Guilt. He hadn't been back to India for 5 years. Not properly. Not to the streets he once walked barefoot. Not to the corners where jasmine flowers still hung outside tea stalls. He had given talks in Delhi, spoken at universities, smiled for cameras, but he hadn't gone home. Not really. And now here he was, about to speak to a room full of leaders about India's future when he hadn't even visited his own village since his mother passed. He closed his eyes for a second. A quiet second. The room didn't make a sound. Not even the cameras. And in that breathless moment, a single line from his father echoed in his mind. Don't speak to impress. Speak to serve. He opened his eyes again. This time, they weren't looking at the cameras, or the rows of tech officials. They were looking at the first row, at Narendra Modi, and at the empty seat beside him. There was supposed to be someone sitting there. Sundar had been told the seat was reserved, but now it was empty, as if someone changed their mind. And then Sundar began. His voice was steady, but soft, like he wasn't delivering a speech, but telling a story. A story that began on a narrow street in Tamil Nadu. A story about a boy who saved for 3 months just to buy a single book. A boy who read that book under the streetlight because his house didn't have electricity that week. A boy who didn't speak perfect English until he was 21. A boy who once skipped a meal so his sister could eat. And that boy, he said, still lived inside him. The audience didn't move. They hadn't expected this. They thought they'd hear about AI, about cloud technology, about growth charts. But Sundar spoke about barefoot mornings, about standing in long water lines with steel buckets, about watching his mother tie her sari tighter so she could stretch the groceries for one more day. Somewhere in the second row, a woman took off her glasses to wipe her eyes. He spoke for 8 minutes. No slides, no buzzwords, just truth, raw and simple. And when he finished, he didn't smile. He simply stepped back from the mic. Then came the silence. A full 5 seconds passed, and then something happened. Prime Minister Modi stood up. He didn't clap, he didn't nod. He simply walked forward. His steps were quiet, almost too quiet for a stage that echoed. He moved toward Sundar, then paused, leaned in, and said something soft, short, in Tamil, just a few words. No one else heard them clearly, not even the people on stage, not even the news anchors. But Sundar's face changed instantly. His eyes softened, his jaw shook, and for the first time in years, his shoulders dropped, like a heavy weight had been pulled off him, like someone had finally seen the boy under the success. Then Modi stepped back. He didn't explain what he said. He just returned to his seat, and the whole room stood. Not because they were told, not because it was planned, but because something real had happened. Something no headline could explain, something no mic could record. Afterward, as people rushed to speak to him, Sundar quietly slipped away. He didn't stay for photos. He didn't take interviews. Instead, he walked to the far end of the hall, opened a side door, and stepped out into the soft evening light of New Delhi. There, standing by a small black car, was an old man with silver hair. He wasn't part of the event. He wore no badge, just a white shirt, loose trousers, and sandals that looked older than Sundar's first laptop. Sundar looked at him, really looked, and then he smiled. "Anna," he said quietly. The man nodded. They hugged. No words, just held each other, and the world never saw that part. But that moment, more than the speech, more than the summit, was the start of something deeper, something India would soon feel, something the world would soon watch unfold. Because what Modi whispered in Tamil wasn't just a greeting, it was a challenge, and Sundar had accepted it. The car ride was quiet. No tinted windows, no loud engines, just the soft hum of Delhi traffic fading behind them. Sundar sat in the back seat beside his older brother Rajan, the man who had always stayed behind, the one who never asked for anything, the one who had just been waiting outside the spotlight, outside the stage for Sundar to look back. Rajan didn't say much. He just placed his hand gently on Sundar's wrist. Sundar leaned back and closed his eyes, but the moment wouldn't leave him. Modi's words still echoed in his chest like a drumbeat. It wasn't what he expected, and yet it was exactly what he needed. What Modi whispered had been simple, only 5 words in Tamil, but they carried more than a sentence. They carried a door to everything Sundar had tried not to remember. "Did you hear it too?" Sundar asked softly. Rajan didn't need to ask what he meant. He nodded. "Double quotes. I heard," he said. Amma would have cried. They drove past corners Sundar used to know. Places where boys still played cricket with plastic bottles, where aunties still spread pickles on rooftops, where dogs still lay curled under power poles with missing wires. He had been here just 2 years ago, but never like this. Never without guards. Never with the window open. They stopped outside a narrow alley. Sundar stepped out, his shoes hitting the old dirt road. It was smaller than he remembered. Darker, too. Or maybe it was just the evening light. Or maybe the memory of his mother had made it seem brighter in his head all these years. He looked up at the faded blue door, rusted on the edges. Same old bell hanging beside it, cracked walls, plants growing through the cracks. This was his real home, not the glass towers, not the wide boardrooms. This, the place where he learned how to wait, how to share, how to dream. Rajan opened the door slowly. Inside the house smelled of sandalwood and old books. 1 room, 1 cot, 1 kitchen, and in the corner, still sitting under the window, was the small desk Sundar had built at 14. The same desk where he first touched a computer chip. Not a laptop, just a chip. One he took from an old radio his father brought home broken. He walked to it, touched the corner. His fingers trembled. "I thought they'd throw this out," he said. Rajan smiled. "They wanted to. I said no." Then Rajan placed something in Sundar's hand. A folded paper. Old. Yellowing. "What is this?" Modi didn't just whisper. "To you," Rajan said. "He sent this." Sundar opened the paper. It was a letter, handwritten, not typed. The ink was slightly smudged at the edges. He read the first line. "You once built a desk with nothing but a hammer, scrap wood, and stubborn hope. Now I ask you to help us build something larger with the same hands." The rest of the letter was a vision. It wasn't an order, not a demand, just an invitation to return, not just physically but with purpose. Modi wanted him to help build India's next digital backbone, not for the cities, not for the rich, but for the forgotten places, the small villages, the schools with no power, the farmers with no maps, the widows with no phones, the children with no signal. Not a contract, not a campaign, but a commitment, personal, real. And at the bottom of the letter, there was a line that stunned Sundar. Don't build to be remembered, build so they don't forget themselves. Sundar sat down on the floor, the old floor, the one his mother used to sweep while humming old Tamil lullabies. He didn't speak for a while, he just stared at the letter. Finally, he whispered, "How do I even begin?" Rajan sat beside him, cross-legged, like they used to as boys. "The same way you always have," he said. "One line of code, one word of truth." Sundar stayed the night in the house. No hotel, no assistants, no cameras. Just him, his brother, and memories that smelled like jasmine and dust. The next morning, before the sun rose, Sundar stepped out onto the street. He stood where the vegetable man used to set up his cart, where he once helped his mother carry onions and tomatoes in a torn bag. A boy passed by on a cycle, headphones in his ears, face lit by the glow of a cheap smartphone. Sundar called out, "Hey, what network are you using?" The boy stopped, confused. "Free one," he said. "It works half the time. Do you study?" "Yes, but we don't have proper classes. We share videos when the signal is good." Sundar smiled gently. He didn't ask anything else. He'd just watched the boy ride off into the morning. That moment sealed it. He called Rajan over. "I'm going to accept," he said. "You already did last night." "No, I'm going to do more than that." And that was the beginning of a quiet project. No press release, no headline. They called it Pafai, a Tamil word. It means path, and it would change the map of India forever. The plan was simple, on paper. But real lives never fit inside neat paper boxes. Pa. Thai was not just about laying fiber. It wasn't just about signals or satellites. It was about dignity. It was about the kind of respect that didn't need applause. It was about giving people something they didn't even know they could ask for: connection, not just digital, but human. Sundar sat in a plain office in Chennai, no nameplate, no logo, just one window, one desk, and a wall full of photographs. None of the faces were famous, no celebrities, just people. A grandmother in Kerala, smiling with her first phone. A teacher in Orissa, sharing online lessons through a single working tablet. A boy in Meghalaya, who built a drone from spare plastic parts and YouTube videos he downloaded at night when the data speed was strongest. Every picture was a promise, and Sundar had no intention of breaking them. But the pushback came faster than expected. On the fourth day of planning, a government advisor from a powerful ministry entered the room uninvited. He looked around, scoffed at the plain chairs, then turned to Sundar. "You're wasting your name," he said. "This work belongs to committees, not to you." Sundar stayed quiet. "This is too small for you," the man said, waving his hand toward the map of rural networks pinned on the wall. "You should be speaking at G20 panels, not fixing signal towers in tribal zones." Sundar smiled, calm and still. Then he said, "Tell me something." The man raised an eyebrow. "When was the last time your phone had no signal for 7 hours while your mother was sick?" Silence. Or when your daughter had to walk to hills just to get a strong enough connection to submit homework? Still silence. If that happened, you wouldn't call it a small thing. The man looked away, said nothing, and left after he was gone. Rajan leaned against the doorframe. "That was quiet fire," he said. Sundar laughed. "Quiet is all I know." They worked day and night, not from boardrooms, but from the field. Sundar wore sandals again, visited schools with broken chalkboards and roofs made of tin. He listened more than he spoke, wrote everything down in a small red notebook, the same kind he used as a child. They started building micro-signal hubs in the smallest villages first, not where the spotlight was, but where the silence lived. In hills, where radio still ruled. In plains where people thought the internet was only for rich folks in Delhi or Mumbai. And then the first test came. A storm hit a village in Andhra Pradesh. Trees fell, wires snapped, roads washed away. The team was ready to pull back. The old network plans had no way to reach that area during floods. But Sundar didn't wait. He flew down himself, hired a local boat, and paddled through murky water, with 3 local boys who didn't speak much English, but knew every hidden current like it was family. They reached the broken station in 2 hours, and Sundar stayed up all night with them, setting up a temporary tower using bamboo, spare routers, and solar packs. They slept on mats, ate rice with salt, and by morning, the entire village had a signal again. The next day, a woman from that village called her son in Mumbai for the first time in 3 years. He cried, and Sundar didn't tell anyone about it, but word spread anyway, not through media, through people, through stories whispered at tea stalls and bus stands, through small videos shared on Facebook. A CEO in rubber slippers fixing wires in a flooded village. No guards, no speech, just work. Back in Delhi, the silence from the officials began to shift, and then came a call. Modi wanted to meet again. No cameras, no public event, just him and Sundar, alone. The meeting happened at night, behind the main offices, in a garden, lit by soft lamps. Modi sat on a bench. Sundar approached slowly. I saw the video, Modi said. I didn't post it, Sundar replied. Exactly. Modi smiled. They sat for a long while. No formal words, no handlers. Just 2 men who understood that power isn't loud. Real power is when no one is watching. Then Modi leaned forward and asked one question. Are you tired? Sundar didn't answer right away. He looked at the moon, above them, at the light filtering through the neem trees. Then he said, I'm not tired, I'm awake. Modi nodded. Good, because we're not done yet. Then he pulled out a folder. Inside were satellite maps, coverage reports, names of 110 villages still marked red, still offline, and at the bottom, one name written in bold, a place Sundar hadn't heard in 20 years. Thirunelveli, his grandfather's birthplace. He looked at Modi. Modi said, start there. And with that, a new chapter began. This one would be harder, because this one wasn't about towers. It was about memory. And memory is harder to fix than any signal. Thirunelveli was hot. Not the kind of heat you escape with AC or sunglasses. It was the kind that clung to your skin, that lived in the cracks of the ground, that hummed in the air like a secret nobody could cool. Sundar stepped out of the car, in plain clothes. No crew, no cameras. Just him and Rajan, holding a dusty folder of old maps. They had come here not as visitors, but as sons of the soil, though the soil no longer recognized their feet. The first person they met was an old man selling betel leaves by the corner of the temple. Rajan smiled. Anna, do you know where the old Pichai house used to be? The man squinted, then shrugged. Pichai, he said. Plenty of those. Which one? Rajan paused. Sundar didn't speak. The man looked at Sundar. Who's this? Before Rajan could answer, Sundar gently said, just someone who left too long ago. They walked further in, past streets that looked smaller now. Power lines sagged between wooden poles. Some buildings had changed, some hadn't, but everything felt quieter, like the village had aged without making noise. They reached the edge of the main road and found it. The house, small, cracked, paint peeling, but it still stood, like it had waited. They stepped in. The inside smelled of dry wood and silence. An old woman swept the floor. She stopped when she saw them. We're just visiting, Sundar said softly. This used to be our grandfather's house. The woman tilted her head. Who are you? Sundar smiled. My name is Sundar. She stared at him for a while, then said, I had a neighbor named Sundar. smart boy, went off to the city, forgot us all. The words hit like quiet stones. Rajan put a hand on Sundar's shoulder. The woman looked closer, her eyes narrowing, and then suddenly, her face changed. "Wait," she said. "You're the one from the newspaper, the American man, the phone man." Sundar nodded. She didn't smile, she didn't clap. Instead, she said, "So you remember us now?" Sundar stood still. It was the first time someone had asked it out loud. He bowed his head. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to disappear." The woman didn't reply, but she stepped aside and let them in. They sat in the old courtyard. Birds chirped above. Far off, someone played an Adaswaram. It was the same song Sundar's grandmother used to hum while frying dosa. After a while, the woman returned with tea, placed it without a word, and then Sundar opened his notebook. "I want to start the next phase here," he said to Rajan. "Not just signal, but learning hubs, mobile labs, free access for every child." Rajan looked at him. "They don't want big dreams," he said. "They want honesty. Then that's all I'll give them." The next morning, Sundar called a meeting in the school courtyard. No stage, no mics, just benches and plastic chairs. Only 30 people came, mostly elders, a few curious children, one teacher, 2 farmers. Sundar stood in front of them. "I was born close to here," he said, "but I left, and now I've returned, not to teach you, but to build with you." No one clapped. One man raised a hand. "Are you giving charity?" Sundar shook his head. "No, I'm offering a connection. Not just to the internet, but to each other." "Why now?" another asked. "Why after all these years?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because someone whispered something that reminded me who I am." For the first time, there was a murmur of interest. "We're not building towers," he continued. "We're building futures. I need your help." After the meeting, a girl approached him. 12, maybe 13. Worn slippers, notebook hugged to her chest. "I want to learn," she said, "but we don't have laptops." Sundar looked at her notebook. Her handwriting was neat. Equations scribbled with effort. "What's your name?" he asked. "Meena. If I bring laptops, will you teach the others?" She nodded without blinking. And that was the moment. Not a headline, not a photo, just a girl with a promise. By the end of the week, Pathai launched its first rural learning pod in Thirunelveli. Inside a repurposed post office, they set up 10 tablets, solely charged, with preloaded lessons in Tamil, English, and science. Meena taught the first class. Sundar watched through the doorway, tears stinging his eyes. Not because of the technology, but because the village hadn't clapped when he arrived. They clapped when Meena finished her lesson, and he knew then that he hadn't come back to be remembered. He had come back so they could remember themselves. Rain came suddenly that week, thick, loud, endless. It flooded roads and soaked through rooftops. Small villages along the southern belt were cut off. Some had never had stable roads. Others had never had stable electricity. Now, they had neither, but something strange happened. Even as water rose around homes and trees bent from the storm, people in some of the smallest villages' places, no one visited twice, were able to do something they had never done before. They called, they sent messages, they stayed connected. Thai single quotes as mesh of micro-signal hubs, solar towers, and community relays had survived the storm, not because they were powerful, but because they were small, light, local, and smart. For the first time, signal didn't collapse with the rain. It stood, and the people noticed. In one village, an elderly woman was able to video call her son in Qatar and show him that she was safe. In another, a schoolteacher streamed a live update to students stuck at home, teaching them about monsoon safety, using just a mobile phone and a wooden board. In yet another, 3 teenagers recorded flood damage and uploaded it to a relief database using an app Sundar's team had quietly built just weeks before. Each story became a thread, and the thread grew into a network of quiet hope. But the real moment, the one that changed everything, came from an unexpected place. One evening, while the storm still rumbled over the hills, Sundar sat inside the Thirunelve hub. The power had flickered, and rain tapped like fingers on the roof. Meena entered, soaked to the bone. "Why are you here?" Sundar asked, standing quickly. "You should be home." She held out a small phone, wrapped in a plastic bag. "A boy from another village messaged me," she said. "His village doesn't have signal yet. He wanted to know if I could record some science lessons." Sundar froze. "He said he walks 5 kilometers to get signal, just to check the messages I post." Sundar sat down slowly. This wasn't about towers anymore. This was about movement. One that didn't need roads. One that didn't wait for permission. He helped her set up the recording space. They used a single lamp, a chalkboard made from plywood, and a borrowed mic from the nearby temple. Meena stood in front of the board, nervous. "Just speak like you did the first day," Sundar said. She nodded and began. That recording spread like fire, not because it was flashy, not because it was promoted, but because it was real. Her words, spoken in soft Tamil, reached children who thought learning stopped when rain came. They watched her on borrowed phones, in group halls, under plastic sheets. One boy in a fishing village built his own whiteboard using boat wood. One girl wrote all her notes on the back of leftover rice bags. They didn't have notebooks, but they had signal. The story reached the capital. A government minister visited the Thirunelve hub. He wore polished shoes and carried files that stayed dry even in the storm. He expected to meet engineers. Instead, he met Meena. She didn't prepare a speech. She simply showed him the video messages she had received. "They don't just want internet," she said. "They want someone to believe in them." The minister said nothing for a while. Then he asked Sundar, "Do you have more teachers like her?" Sundar smiled. "No." The man looked confused. "But we're training more," Sundar added. "Not in universities, in the fields, in huts, in hearts." 2 days later, the government passed a quiet order. No press conference, no ribbon cutting, just one signature. It approved a special fund to support local rural educators who were using technology to reach others. And all of it started with one girl who recorded a lesson during a storm. But even as things grew, Sundar didn't rest. He traveled to each zone, marked in red on Modi's map. One by one, hills, deserts, mangroves, even places marked too remote in official reports. He rode motorbikes, tractors, even climbed hills with signal kits strapped to his back. He slept on mats, ate with farmers, learned new dialects, and all the while, he updated the same red notebook, pages bent, ink smudged. He had left behind the Google offices for this, not to be seen but to see. Then, one afternoon, he received a letter, handwritten, no sender's name, just 3 words on the envelope. "Read this alone." Inside was a note in Tamil. A different handwriting than Modi's single quote says. It said, "You've done enough now. Come to Delhi." Not for a talk, for something else. Sundar folded the note, stared out the window of the small school where he'd been helping fix routers. The children ran outside, laughing, holding up their tablets like treasure. He whispered to himself, what else could it be? He didn't know yet, but Delhi was waiting. The Delhi air felt different this time. Not cold, not warm, just still, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Sundar stepped out of the train station, wearing the same clothes he'd worn in Thirunelve. Not pressed, not polished, just real. His red notebook was tucked under his arm, half the pages bent, none of them blanked. A car waited outside, unmarked, plain. The driver didn't speak, just handed Sundar an envelope before starting the engine. Inside the envelope was a short message: reach the south lawn. No one will guide you. Follow the sound. The car stopped before the Prime Minister's residence. But Sundar didn't enter through the usual gates. Instead, he walked around the side, toward the back gardens. The path was lined with lamps, soft, golden, almost dreamlike. Then, faintly, he heard it music, a nadaswaram, slow, haunting. It played the same tune he'd heard weeks ago in Thirunelvi. He followed. At the center of the lawn was a single table Nadara. Modi stood beside it alone. Behind him, a large screen, off and blank. On the table, a clay oil lamp burned gently, and next to it, an old radio. Modi gestured for Sundar to sit, then sat across from him. No guards, no staff, just silence, and the soft wind brushing against the neem leaves. You've traveled more in the past 2 months than most leaders do in a lifetime, Modi said. Sundar said nothing, just waited. Modi smiled. Do you remember what I whispered that day? Sundar nodded. You carry their eyes. Do you understand it now? Sundar looked down, placed the red notebook on the table. I do, he said quietly. They weren't looking for a hero. They were looking for a mirror. Modi leaned forward. This mirror should not stop at the villages. Then he reached into a small wooden box and took out a pin. Simple, round brass. He handed it to Sundar. It had one word engraved on it. Pichai. We're creating a new advisory seat, Modi said. Non-political, unpaid, untitled, but powerful. I want you to be our voice for rural connectivity and dignity, not just through tech, through empathy, through example. Sundar stared at the pin. I'm not qualified, he whispered. Modi chuckled. Then you are more qualified than most. The screen behind them lit up. No videos, no logos, just a map of India. Red dots began to fade, one by one, replaced by soft glowing lights. These are the places you touched, Modi said, without speeches, without cameras, without asking for anything. A small dot lit up at the bottom corner. Thirunelveli. Sundar stood. I don't want attention, he said. You won't get it, Modi replied. You'll get responsibility. The next week, Sundar returned to Chennai, not to rest, to plan, but this time, he wasn't alone. Meena had been flown to Delhi, not for a ceremony, but for training. She would help lead a new program where village children taught other children across districts digitally. Peer signal. That was the new layer of Pichai. Connection through trust, not rank. The program spread fast, not because of funding but because children believed each other before they believed officials. They shared stories, tips, fears, lessons, not filtered, not polished, real. And Sundar, he stayed quiet, mostly in the background, but every month he visited a new village. He carried no bags, no team, just his notebook and a solar charger in his pocket. One day, in a far-off village near the Nepal border, a group of kids gathered around him. One girl pointed at his face. Are you the Google man? She asked. He smiled. No, he said. I'm the Meena man. And they laughed. The story didn't end with one whisper, because whispers don't end. They travel. They echo. They become other voices in a village in Gujarat. A woman started a local repair workshop after watching Meena's lessons in a school in Jammu. A teacher live-streamed his classroom to others using Pichai's low data tools. In a desert tent in Rajasthan, 2 brothers who had never seen the sea built a paper boat, wrote Pichai on it, and posted a photo online. It went viral. And in Delhi, on a quiet evening, Modi received a message from Sundar. No greeting, no title, just a sentence. They remember themselves now. Modi didn't reply. He didn't need to. He simply leaned back, looked out the window toward the south lawn, and whispered again, this time, to no one. It had been a year, 12 months since that speech. 12 months since Modi whispered 5 words in Tamil. 12 months since Sundar picked up his red notebook and stepped into the quiet corners of India that most maps ignored. Now, that notebook sat on a table in a classroom in a small mountain village. Open, its pages were filled. Every one of them. No blank spaces left. No empty plans. Meena flipped through it slowly. She wasn't a student anymore. She was now a regional tech mentor, working under the Pathai program, not because she had a degree, but because she had proof, not paper proof, people proof. Villages that remembered her name. Children who copied her notes. Mothers who gave her warm rice before class. And today, she had been asked to do something new. Sundar had written her a letter, no signature, just 2 lines. Read it to them, then burn it. Not to erase it, but to set it free. She stood before a gathering of students, teachers, and parents. People from 7 villages had come for the event. There was no stage, just a mat on the ground and a tree to keep the sun off their heads. She opened the letter and began. When I was a child, I watched my mother stir rice with one hand while balancing the radio with the other. She used to say, if the world is out there, we must let it in. I didn't understand it back then. Now I do. The world does not enter through loud voices. It enters through kindness, through patience, through signal in a storm. And sometimes, through a little girl who said yes when no one else did. Your path is not mine. It's yours now. Lead it, bend it, carry it, and when it's time, whisper it forward. When she finished, no one clapped. They stood, every single person. An elder woman walked forward and gently lit the edge of the letter with a candle. They all watched it burn, not as an ending but as a beginning passed to the air. Later that night, as the village went quiet, Meena sat by herself, watching the stars. The signal tower beside the school blinked softly. Even the moon seemed quieter, like it was listening. Then she heard it. Footsteps on the dirt. She turned. Sundar stood there. He had arrived without a word, carrying no bag, no files, just a fresh, red notebook. I thought you were in Delhi, she said. I was, he said. But something brought me here. She smiled. What? He looked up at the stars, then said softly, the same thing that brought me back to India. Meena tilted her head. A whisper. He nodded. And in that silence, surrounded by trees, dirt paths, and the soft hum of signal, Meena asked him the one question she had never dared to ask before. What did Modi really whisper to you that day? Sundar looked at her. His voice was calm. He said, they still speak your name in silence. Go. Listen. Meena's eyes filled, and the 2 of them sat quietly as the signal tower blinked beside them. No more speeches, no more ceremonies, just 2 people, 1 whisper, and 1,000 paths ahead.